This evening, both of them will share their personal experiences about the origins of the Manager Level Up program and Joan's book baby, as she calls it, Manager's First Aid Kit. You will also get to hear from them as they read sections of the book that are particularly special to both of them. Now, I'm really excited. I for sure cannot wait. Now, quickly, before we turn to Joan, we want to make sure we get full participation from all of you. So make sure to use Facebook comments if you have any insights or to ask any questions at any point throughout today's session. Also, we love to see your reactions, so please don't be shy. Now, let's get the ball rolling. For those of you who have read the sample pages of Manager's First Aid Kit on Joan's website, you may be familiar with Lydia. So Joan, can you tell us a little bit more about you, your book baby, and of course, Lydia?
All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, those of you who are live with us, and also for those of you who will be watching the recording later on. So Lydia is actually not her real name, and I disclosed it during an interview earlier today. So I can tell you that Lydia is actually the name of the restaurant. So the restaurant was called Lydia's Seafood Restaurant. But I'm still not going to tell you the name of this wonderful individual. So Lydia, as we will refer to her, was this fantastic waitress. I mean, she was just so effervescent. She was so customer oriented. The guests loved her. Her co-workers loved her. I loved her and still do. And repeat guests were always amazed that Lydia remembered them, and she was always there with the smiling face to greet them and just always surpassing expectations. And so management decided to promote Lydia from being a waitress, and so she became maitre d'. So of course, Lydia was happy because it showed that, the work she was doing was appreciated. Of course, there was some extra money, so that's always good.
Very good.
Yeah, but then, things started to, come off the tracks a little bit. Because, I mean, with all the wonderful competencies and skills and attitude and customer orientation that Lydia had, she had never been trained how to be a manager, how to be a supervisor. So whenever it got busy in the restaurant, Lydia would start doing what she knew how best to do, and that is being a waitress. So there was no one who was planning, leading, organizing, and controlling which are the managerial functions. Rather, everyone reverted to the same level and everybody was waiting tables. And you could tell that there was no one in charge. And so things would seem a little bit chaotic. And so Lydia felt badly because she knew somehow that she wasn't living up to expectations. Management was disappointed because their superstar waitress wasn't showing up as a superstar manager. And it's for Lydia and so many other wonderful, hardworking, enthusiastic people like her that have written this book. So it helps you to navigate the transition from line staff to supervisor or manager. So you can level up without the stress, without the frustration, without the uncertainty, self-doubt, etc. So that's what the Manager's First Aid Kit is all about.
Thank you so much for that, Joan. I mean, I can completely relate to Lydia. That was, certainly when, I first started interacting with you and you shared those pages, because remembering my journey from moving from, well, not even as much a manager, but what I call an intimate to a supervisor, and the dynamics of the relationship that change, when you're kind of, whispering together and you're all banding together as a team. And then you go into this position where you now have to tell people what to do. Yep. And how challenging that could be, especially if you have somebody who doesn't, for whatever reason, has their own perspective as to how they should do things, and you're sweating because you're the one that has to deliver on certain objectives. So
exactly. And if these individuals were your peers before, and then all of a sudden you show up one day and you're their boss, that can be tricky to navigate as well.
So, you know, I mean, so for everybody who, you know, have, you know, you're following us tonight for the first time, you know, what I want to say is, you know, just from some of the, you know, the excerpts and stuff that I've picked up and what I've, you know, been able to read from the book, you know, it really is a fabulous tool and really offers some great insights. And like I told Joan, honestly, I wish I could rewind time, drag the manager's first second back with me. You never know, you know. Perhaps I might be running Barbados now. I don't know, you know, but that's just how fantastic this book is as a tool, you know. But Joan, what I want you to do, because for those of you, for those people who may be online tonight, you know, who don't actually know much about you, I just want you to give us a quick, you know, I know you're, you know, loyal fans know as, you know, a lot about you and how wonderful you are. So I just want to share a few perspectives for those people who might be new on the live event.
Okay. So I have had what you could call a checkered past. And what do I mean by that? I've had a number of careers and it hasn't been a straight line at all. My first career was in laboratory medicine. And I did that for an extended period of time. You know, I was in laboratory medicine for almost a decade. And one of the reasons that I transitioned from being a technician to being in management, because I decided to go back to school and I did a master's in health service administration, is because I was becoming increasingly frustrated by what I perceived back then to be inadequate management, poor policies. So as a technician, I couldn't do as much as I would have liked to do and as much as could have been done to help people because the management wasn't in place playing that supporting role to make sure that we had the resources that we needed in order to do the various laboratory tests. So I went off and I studied at the George Washington University Hospital, did a master's in health service administration. And when I returned to Antigua, that's where I'm from, Antigua and Barbuda, when I returned home, the timing was just perfect because there was a small community hospital and the administrator at that time was getting ready to retire. So they were recruiting someone to understudy him for a period of time and then to take over as the hospital administrator. So right out of graduate school with my master's in health service administration, I became a hospital administrator. And so still in the healthcare field, I did that for a number of years. And then the opportunity presented itself for me to still in the healthcare field, but to manage a different type of facility. And this was a drug rehabilitation center. And I'm sure folks may be familiar with the name Eric Clapton, you know, that world famous musician. He has a home in Antigua. He's very fond of Antigua and he opened the Crossroads Center here in Antigua, which was a drug rehabilitation center. And so I worked there for a number of years. All right, fast forward, well, not for a number of years, sorry, I worked there for a period of time. Fast forward, then I transitioned away from the health services sector into general management. And when I sought to make the transition, a lot of people said, what do you work in healthcare? What are you talking about? So I decided, all right, I need an MBA because my original master's, as I mentioned, was specifically for the healthcare sector. So that's when I first became involved with the Cahill School of Business, which at the time was the Center for Management Development. And I did my MBA at UE and then joined their faculty. I started teaching in the program afterwards. And that's when it was more, Dr. Janine Kama was a mentor to me. She became a dear, dear friend to me. And, you know, we remain close to this point in time. So that's how I broke into general management. And so I managed the Antigua Lottery for a while. I was chairman of the Employers Federation. And then someone made me an offer I couldn't refuse. They wanted me to come and manage a special project. And that's when I met Lydia, because that special project was called the Taurus at Home Project. And it was to have Antiguans and Barbudans embrace tourism as theirs, as opposed to something that the country did. So, and the slogan at the time was tourism is everybody's business. And the concept was that with Taurus at home, have the people who serve in the industry experience the tourism product themselves so that they get an appreciation for what a guest experience is like. And so that was like the best job in the world, because I went around like Santa Claus 365 days of the year, giving away, stays and all-inclusive resorts, all the opportunities that tourists had. We got, and the service providers were fantastic. They all donated their products and their services. And then I got to dole them out to different persons. Plus, I wrote a blog for the entire year. So I got to go and stay in some of the nicest resorts on the island, then write about it. Yeah. So the entity that sponsored that project, the project was for a year. And when the year was over, they asked me to come on board to set up an HR department. It was a conglomerate. Mm-hmm. So they had a personnel department at the time. So they asked me to come on board to design and roll out an HR department. At that point in time, I had zero or perhaps less than zero interest in HR. So I really had to think about it long and hard. And then I negotiated, and I tell this story in the book. I negotiated that it wouldn't just be HR, but it would be HR and strategic development, mm-hmm. because that excited me. And I negotiated that I would set up the HR department, run it for 3 years, and then he would relieve me of the HR portfolio and just leave me to do strategic development. Well, 9 years later, I was still doing HR because I fell in love with it. And that began my journey as an HR practitioner. Ultimately, I became a coach, a master trainer, and I'm just loving every minute of it.
So Joan, I mean, just from that, just from, the insights you gave us in your personal stories, I mean, and we learned so much, one, never believe that where you start is where you have to end.
Exactly.
Leave yourself open to trying new things, because you never know where that's going to lead you, and most importantly, keep your networks wide, because, that gives you a great opportunity in terms of, moving forward. And I know that's actually one of the sections that, you do cover in your book. But before I get away and I take over this interview, there's a special someone here with us today. And, for those of you who may not be as familiar with Joan, this individual is who she has dedicated the manager's first aid kit to. So I want to introduce everybody to Joan's fabulous niece, Carissa, and invite Carissa to join us, live, so she can just reveal herself.
Hello. That introduction is so amazing, fabulous. Valerie.
Carissa, if you can tell everybody with us today a little bit about yourself.
Well, first and foremost, and most relevant to what we're doing this evening, I am the favorite niece. Don't let anyone tell you anything different.
No argument.
Professionally, though, I am in the field of communication and events. My aunt is someone who has, of course, mentored me as a child coming up and as a professional. So this book baby, as she likes to call it, it's an honor to me for me to have inspired her in some way, because she does that and so much more for me. And it's something that, as I've started reading it, I want to not put it down, but it's so informative, and it calls for so much introspection and reflection that you kind of have to savor it like a fine wine. You know what I mean?
I like that, Carissa. And if I could interject for a moment, just so you don't think, okay, well, we've invited Joan's family member, her dear niece, and she is biased, I think this is actually a nice point to, share a little bit about what some other people are actually saying about the book, just to lead into some of the discussion that we're going to be having with Joan and Carissa as we go along, And one of the reviews or the feedback that we've gotten that I've seen that I absolutely love is something that was shared from Mr. Lord. I hope I pronounced your last name right. And he's the president of the Human Resources Professionals of Antigua and Barbuda. And he says, I think that this book is very timely, especially as we continue to navigate the anxieties and uncertainties of the pandemic. As leaders, we tend to leave ourselves undone while we attend to the needs of others. But this book shines a light on some of our realities. The content is very well written and presented in true Joan fashion, with splashes of humor that make it even more enjoyable to read. And I think that that really summarizes a lot of what you just said, Carissa. So I just had to share that with our followers tonight, just to support, what you were saying in terms of your introduction into this book.
So they don't have to take it from me.
That's true. So Carissa, as an avid reader myself, I know there's certain pages in any book that tend to stay with us and that we immediately connect with. Now, can you share which part or parts of the Manager First Aid Kit resonated with you the most?
Absolutely. So it's really a wonderful resource, but I'm going to share a bit of the second chapter, which touches on management of self, because it was one of the first sections of the book that really spoke to me. It's at page 14, and it's 4 steps to emotional agility. So Susan David outlines the following steps that you can use to leverage your cerebral cortex and improve emotional agility and, by extension, your efficacy. Notice when you've been hooked or triggered by your thoughts and feelings. Label your thoughts and emotions. Accept your thoughts and emotions by acknowledging them and exploring them from the position of curiosity. Act on your values.
Thank you.
By accepting these steps in the space between experiencing a stimulus and reacting to it, you position yourself to become much more resourceful. The reality is that all emotions, even the negative ones, have a positive intent. And once you identify that positive intent, you can then align yourselves with actions with it rather than the negative emotion itself. And that last part really stood out to me because I can relate to maybe being triggered and acting out of that place. So this shows me that emotions have a purpose, and if I take the time to examine them, I can learn from them and act in a way that serves me better and is more aligned with what it is that I'm trying to accomplish and who I am, both personally and professionally.
Now, Carissa, because I know, this is actually a fantastic section of the book to speak to, and this is under the segment of managing self. And for those of you who may not know, Joan has organized this book to address 3 key areas that managers may, find challenges with in the work environment, and that is managing self, managing others, and managing systems and processes. So emotional intelligence is really about self-awareness and actualization. And, so I really appreciate you kind of, giving insights from your perspective as to how, important it is for us to become successful managers. Now, Joan, having heard from Carissa, you want to give any further insights into the whole area of emotional agility and emotional intelligence?
Absolutely. So emotional intelligence is the single most valid and reliable predictor of leadership success. So you may have heard before of IQ. So that's your intelligence. And you can think about it as saying, well, you need IQ to get into the room in the first place. How you perform when you're in the room will depend on your EQ. That's your emotional intelligence. And what that speaks about is your ability to recognize your own emotions as you experience them, to manage them or regulate them, and also to understand the emotions of others, and to be able to navigate that in a way that enables you to build mutually beneficial relationships. Now, Carissa chose to read a passage about emotional agility. There's a saying that we get hijacked by our emotions. Something happens and you get triggered, so you're angry, you're scared, and it's the fight or flight. And what happens then is that our primitive brain takes over. So you either flee or you want to fight somebody or you freeze. Okay, so that's when your primitive brain is in control. With emotional agility now, your conscious mind takes control. You realize that you're having an emotional response. You look at it for what it is. You try to figure out, okay, what is this emotion telling me? And then you decide, okay, so what do I now do with this information? And it may sound like it takes a long time, but as you develop your emotional agility, it will happen in real time. But you have to practice. You really do have to practice it, or else you will constantly be triggered either by your emotions or the emotions of someone else, because someone else can get angry, someone else can get upset, and then you just react to their being angry, their being upset. With emotional agility, you insert choice into that space. So you're strategic, you're mindful about what you say and do.
Thank you, Joan. I mean, like I said, I mean, the gift that keeps on giving, some really great and wonderful insights. And hope everybody, I hope, you're really being empowered and, excited about what, opportunities present themselves with this particular, management self-help book. Now, Joan, I know, obviously this is a passion project for you. And,
Yes.
it is, I know, because, book baby's real. And I want to turn, to you and ask you, because, Carissa shared, what she's, connected with, but you as the author, what is I guess, two questions. What is your favorite part of the book? So a two-part question. And then which part of the book did you find it the hardest to put together?
Oh, I'm going to answer the second one first because it's so hard to pick a favorite because there's so much in the book that I love. But the part that was most difficult for me to write is the very last chapter, because I didn't intend to write that chapter at all. I thought my book was finished when I had written, 17 chapters, and I thought the book was done. And so we did some market research, we had some webinars, and we had some focus groups, and we polled folks to ask them, okay, these are the topics. What else would you like to see covered in a book of this nature? And I mean, geez, just about everybody said time management. And I, rolled my eyes and pretended I didn't hear or see it, because I absolutely did not want to talk about time management. Why? Because I don't think it's a thing. I don't believe in managing time, right? Because time is what it is. What's management? Planning, leading, organizing, controlling. But guess what? Time is already organized, right? 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, you know the drill. We can't rearrange that, okay? We can't control time either. It's going to march on at its own pace. So I don't believe in time management. What I believe in is setting priorities and allocating your time based on the priorities that you've set. So my chapter on time management is actually not about time management, and that's why I called it Banishing the Myth of Time Management. So I know that's controversial, but that's my belief system, is that time management is not a myth. What you manage, the decisions you make, the priorities you set for yourself. And so that was the most difficult chapter to write, because it took me a long time to figure out how to write a chapter about time management when I didn't believe in time management. So then what was my favorite? And no, I can't do a favorite. I'm already in trouble for saying Carissa is my favorite niece. So chapters are not going to get mad at me, but still, I don't want to. But I'll tell you.
I was gonna laugh and say for any family members on the call tonight, don't worry. I mean, after this wonderful gift that Joan is presenting us with, hopefully we can convince her to write other books, and she has other people to dedicate it, so we can move the title of favorite around. Sorry about that, Joan. Continue.
So the chapter on trust. One of the reasons that I love that chapter so much is that it contains a lot of original thought. A lot of critical thinking went into this chapter. What do I mean by that? In some of the chapters, I present theories from, other persons. But the building trust chapter is something that I conceptualized based on my experience and, a lot of really deep thinking about what trust is all about. And so I'd like to read a little bit from that chapter. And I should mention that every chapter begins with a quotation. I've been collecting quotations for years. And so I have a fantastic collection. And every chapter starts with a quotation that's meaningful to me and that relates to the content of the chapter. So chapter 8 is about building trust. And this is the quotation. As a boss, you can demand compliance, but you must earn commitment. And the coin of that realm is trust. For people to commit to you, they really must trust you. So this is my trust model. 4 components of trust. There's a tendency to view trust as an all or nothing variable. Either you trust someone or you don't. In reality, it's much more nuanced and contextual than that. It is useful to break down the concept of trust into 4 elements, namely competence, character, benevolence, and consistency. When you don't trust someone, that could be because you question their competence or ability to complete the task at hand. Or you may have doubts or questions about their character, their honesty, their integrity. Or you have reason to question whether they have your best interests at heart. Or it could be that their past performance has been inconsistent, thereby creating some doubt or concern about whether they will deliver this time around. So my trust model has 4 components: competence, character, benevolence, and consistency. And of course, in the chapter, then I go on to talk about each of those 4 elements.
Joan, I mean, again, this is so insightful, and what particularly resonated with me is consistency. And, because you can't build trust by just doing it, ever so often, because,
Exactly.
you need to continue to build a journey, as I tell someone very close to me, when trust is broken, you start back at 0. And so it is important to, remember that this is a journey that you must continue to walk, and to bring people along, with you, So Carissa, I don't know if you have any particular perspectives on the issue of trust that you want to share with us.
Well, of course, the pride is the first thing at the forefront. But in relation to the element of trust, I find it really interesting how you've sort of broken it down and compartmentalized it into different steps. Because something that you've shared with me before is very valid. You can trust people to varying degrees, or you can trust people with certain aspects. So it's not an all or nothing sort of a situation. And applying that personally and professionally, I think it gives us a clearer picture of how and again, this book is about management, but the first chapter speaks to managing self. So a lot of these things you can also apply to your personal life as well. At least that's what I'm finding. Yeah. I'm finding that to be quite useful. So it's useful in that regard, and as well, of course, the context that we're speaking of now, managing teams and managing people.
And Valerie, in terms of losing trust, the metaphor that I use to bring the story home in terms of how you manage trust is it's like maintaining a bank account, a checking account. And you make deposits into it, and so your balance grows and grows. But you may write a check that wipes out the entire balance in your account and take you into overdraft. And then you're going to have to start from, if you're in overdraft, to get out of the negative numbers and back into the positive. And then your bank might be not look at you the same way going forward because you went into overdraft when you didn't have an overdraft facility. So it's really important. It's something that new and aspiring managers and veteran managers, you really have to be mindful of how you show up. And Val, you mentioned consistency. I call that the meta component of trust, because you have to be consistently competent. Not I work well today and then tomorrow it's hit or miss. Consistently competent, consistently of good character. You can't be honest today and next week is your week for lying. Right? You have to consistently show up as being of good character. And similarly, benevolence, wishing well for your people. If you want your direct reports, your peers, your bosses, your customers to come through for you, they need to be convinced that you mean them well. You wish them well, that you care about them. Once they believe that, they will go the extra mile for you. But if they think, oh, she's just using me, or she doesn't care about me, she only cares about the work, then it's so hard to get them to work with you and for you. So all four components need to be present.
I mean, Joan, again, there's so many things that I can relate to even in my, own journey. And I'm sure people on, who are following tonight's session can relate as well. And actually, before I even jump to what I was going to share, just noticed we got a, few comments. So thank you, Velma Thomas. Velma saying how informative tonight's session has been. So it's good to know that we're connecting with you. And Jasmine has, she made the comment respond versus react. And that I think relates very, connects very clearly to emotional intelligence and, some of the things, again, that we've been talking about. So thank you so much for your comments and your feedback and your insights. And, so again, just to remind, if you're now joining the tonight's session, feel free to leave your comments, ask any questions, and, we're going to be happy to facilitate. But one of the things that I wanted to, mention that you talked about, Joan, was the whole issue of, being able to kind of, recognize people for their, good work in terms of that benevolence, and I know that was something that was always very important to me, so because sometimes, if you're in a, lead position, the kudos comes to you, a lot of times, sometimes from the outside or for people looking on. And, I always thought it was very important to be able to call out team members and say, well, such and such did, this activity, which really helped to take things forward. And it's also a way of pulling up people behind you. Excellent for succession planning, because, in the context of the organization or the, whatever, environment you're in, for people to know that they're good people that could be slotted into available positions, when they come. And so I think that's a very, that's a very powerful context. So thank you for that. And I think that this leads very nicely into, again, being able to share some feedback from, some of the executives around the world who had something great to say about the manager's first aid kit. And so I just want to share this comment from Lisa James. She's an HR practitioner and a learning and development facilitator and an organization development consultant. And she says, I endorse this book as a treasure trove of information and a must read for all managers, whether aspiring, new, or seasoned. Joan is an experienced manager, executive, and HR specialist herself, explores all the critical areas that a manager must address in order to successfully navigate personal or organizational challenges. And that also leads very nicely into some feedback from Dr. Louise, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Parks. She's a leadership coach. Loy, thank you very much, Joan. Loy Parks. So Dr. Parks, she shares, one of the most common challenges faced by leaders whom she coaches is maximizing the use of their finite time resource. The book is helpful in two main ways. It outlines a simple but thorough framework for clearly identifying work priorities. Second, it provides practical tips for negotiating with key stakeholders on the use of time resources and the mutual definition of priorities. Now, Joan, I know you touched on this a little bit, with your the chapter that you found the most difficult to write. But I think, again, just seeing how appreciative people are in terms of being able to talk about, why it's important to, to set priorities. Can you share a little bit more for us in that particular area?
Sure. And Lloyd pointed out that the two things, well, she identified two things that I do in the chapter. And one is to shift the focus from time to priorities. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but let me deal with the second thing first in terms of the tips, because as I was coming up as in my first managerial roles, I found it extremely difficult to say no. And this wasn't restricted just to work, because even in your personal relationships, someone asks you to do something and you care about the person, and it's easy to say no to people that you don't care about because you don't care. If they get upset, so what? But people that you genuinely care about, you don't want to disappoint them by saying no when they ask you to do something. But again, remember, the book starts talking about managing self, and self-care is a really important part of that. And sometimes you do have to say no because you simply have too much on your plate, or maybe you don't think you're the right person to do what is being asked of you. Right? So in the book, I give you some very practical strategies and tips for how to say no without damaging the relationship. And as a consultant, I get lots of inquiries about, can you help us to do so and so? And whenever, a client or prospective client, or maybe someone referred the organization to me, what I look at is, what are my priorities? Because for every year, I have, some big bucket things that I want to get done. And I said, okay, does this align with my purpose and with my big ticket items for this year? If it does, do I have the bandwidth to take it on? And it's only if it passes both those hurdles that I will move forward with the assignment. But if I have to say no, it's not just no and it's the end of the conversation. If I have to say no, I try to recommend colleagues in my network who might be able to take it on, but I check with them first to make sure it's okay with them that I give their name to this prospective client. The other thing is saying no to what was asked, but yes to something else. So if they ask me to do something in particular and I don't necessarily think this is the right path, I can say no to that. I say, well, here's what I can do for you. And then I, pivot and introduce them to this other thing, which many times they end up saying yes to. All right. And so that's just a sample of how I deal with, and remember, this is the chapter on time management, because in order to have time, you're going to have to say no to certain things. And the how you say no is really important. And then the other piece that Loy mentioned in terms of negotiating priorities and expectations, because this happens to me as a manager, and Valerie, you probably know that sometimes I lose track of everything I've asked you to do. And so I will just keep piling it on, right? It's important. So it's important to be comfortable enough if you are in that role. So you as a new manager, your boss may be piling stuff up on you and you're starting to feel overwhelmed. So my recommendation then is to say, okay, let me tell you what I have on my plate right now, and then let's have a discussion about what you'd like me to shift aside in order to focus on this new task. A lot of times people, they'll realize that everything you have on your plate is important and they'll give it to somebody else. So, but have the conversation. If you don't have the conversation, you're going to be there feeling all bent out of shape, resentful, stressed, overworked, frustrated. The quality of your work might start to drop because you're spreading yourself too thin. So you have to be confident enough to be your own advocate and to negotiate to have the space and the time you need to work well.
And again, I think, Joan, is definitely something that a lot of us struggle with. I mean, I definitely, have that, like issue in terms of finding it difficult to say no. But over time, exactly what you're saying, you kind of realize that if you don't, it becomes a challenge. So I think,
Yep.
those, that the tips and stuff that you've shared in terms of how you can say no are so useful to be able to, kind of again, make sure that you can, continue to build on those relationships and, maintain that trust bank. And I think even in cases where you do have a boss, I think it shows a level of emotional intelligence as well. And, in
Exactly.
terms of ability to be able to get the job done. So I think to some degree, obviously, they appreciate it. And, one of the
Yes.
things that I know I shared with you, Joan, is, the way I see life sometimes is, you have this expression of keeping the balls in the air. And sometimes it's really about examining those balls and figuring out, okay, which one of these are going to break? And, kind of using that to really guide your, decision making in terms of what you accept and what you know that you can, either, defer or, say no to or redirect, as you kind of so ably suggested. Now, what's interesting for me, Carissa, because I know you're saying that your Auntie Joan has kind of really given you a lot of guidance and insights in terms of your professional journey. So do you find that you're better at saying no?
Absolutely. And as I'm listening to you engage, it's kind of funny because quite recently, she is one of the people I've had to say no to.
She did. She did. She told me no. I was heartbroken. But she did it so well.
Yeah, learning from the best.
Exactly.
Because when she laid it out, I had no rebuttal. Right? Because she came to me, she was like, Auntie, I just cannot give you what you deserve right now with this. And she explained what else she had going on. And as much as it cut me to the core, I accepted it and I moved on and limped along until I found you, Valerie.
Thank you, Valerie.
The excellence of the manager level up program. That's all I can say, it's amazing, honestly, how fast time goes. And so, what I guess I'm going to wrap up because it's particularly one of my favorite sections, for personal reasons. But Joan has a very powerful segment in this book. It's under the segment of managing others. And that's dealing with impossible bosses. Now, I have one last quote, the last review I'm going to share with you from, some of our, again, fans from around the world. So we have a comment from Faye Marie Brown, and she's the director of the Learning and Development Directorate, and she works with the government of Barbados. And she says, chapter 14 caught my attention, caught mine too. Title, Managing Your Boss. Just 9 years into my management journey within the public service, this type of information would have served me well, particularly in my deputizing roles. And she says, thank you, Joan, for these invaluable lessons. I unreservedly recommend the entire book. Now, Joan, a lot of us have had to deal with impossible bosses. So how do you address this? I mean, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I think people are really interested in this segment. How do you address this with your manager's first aid kit?
Okay, just before I tell you about managing your boss, please don't let us log off without giving away that ebook. So we're going to have to give away the ebook once I finish talking about managing your boss. Listen, not everybody's going to win the good boss jackpot, okay? Because not every boss has had the opportunity to read my book. But
Yes.
anyway, the first and most important thing, yes, yeah, the first and most important thing I can tell you about managing what you perceive to be a difficult boss is to realize that it's not about you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about you. Believe you me, it's not about you. I know sometimes it feels as if this person rolls out of bed every morning and the first and only thing they think about is how to make your life miserable
Mm-hmm.
and difficult. I guarantee you, trust me, that's not what's happening. They have their own stuff going on. So when you take that out of it, the belief that it's personal, you can see things differently. All right. So in the book, I go through a number of strategies of what you can do to help to make your boss's life easier. And why should you work to make this person's life easier when they're stressing you? Because if you make their life easier, they'll stress you less. right? Because a lot of times that bad boss, that miserable boss is coping with stress, him or herself. And you know, they say certain things flow downhill, most things. So if they're stressed and they're getting pressure from above, the pressure is going to come down on you. So you want to ensure that they don't have to second guess you to do over stuff that they delegated to you. So it's not about you, and then do your best work. Clarify what their expectations are. Find out what keeps them up at night, and then apply your mind to think, what can I do to help to alleviate that pain point? Because the thing is, gratitude and stress and miserableness can't exist in the same body. If somebody is grateful, they can be miserable at the same time. If somebody is grateful, they can't be stressed at the same time. So give them stuff to be grateful for. And I know some of you out there thinking, you don't know the one that I have. But I assure you that if you diligently apply these tips and techniques that I share with you, you can, because let me tell you, I have had a boss that's so bad that if he were in the NBA, they would have retired his jersey. All right. He was horrible. There was an entire book written about him, and it wasn't written by me. So other people thought he was horrible too. He caused the collapse of an entire accounting firm with offices all across the United States. So I'm not kidding. He was awful. But these strategies worked. At least it relieved my stress. So he continued to be his miserable self, but he no longer had the ability to stress me out.
And I want to close that by saying, don't let anybody else rent space in your head. And I learned that from a very important person who will remain nameless. But Joan, you have given away so much tonight. I mean, and, you know, thank you so much, Carissa, as well. But, you know, she has even more to give away. So Joan, let us give these wonderful people a chance to win an ebook.
Okay, so I'm going to need help from you guys to monitor the comments and see who comes in with it. So let's see who comes in first with, let's see if this is going to be too hard. There's a hashtag that we use to promote the book. Actually, there are a couple of them. So let's see. And Carissa, are you monitoring the comments? Because you know the hashtags.
I am.
Okay, great. So if you think you know it, go ahead and put in the hashtag for what that we're using to promote the book. So let's see who's going to come up first with one of, so there's a primary and then there's some secondary ones. Let's see who's going to get an ebook downloaded from Amazon tonight.
And while we're waiting for those eager people to give us that hashtag, I just want to remind everybody, because I don't want you to leave here today without knowing how to order a book. So you can go to joanhunderwood.com, and you can take advantage of our special pre-order special that Joan has put together for us. And so if you order now, you have until December 12th, you can get a 20% discount and a chance to win something really fabulous from Joan. And that's an emotional intelligence assessment and a one-to-one coaching debrief. I mean, and that's a really powerful, gift that Joan is going to give some lucky reader of her book. You can also buy this book on Amazon. It's up on Amazon. We're keeping it secret, but secrets tend to get out. So you can go on Amazon. And for those of you who have already purchased this book, please, give us some feedback on Amazon. Go ahead and do a review for us. We really, really appreciate it.
All right, Valerie, just to correct one thing, because I don't want people getting mad at me. This special promotion actually closes at midnight on Thursday, because we close it, it's a pre-launch promotion. So we're launching on Friday officially. So you have until midnight Thursday to get the 20% discount and the chance to win the emotional intelligence assessment and the coaching call.
Thank you for that clarification. So everybody remember December 10th. So don't forget joanhunderwood.com. So do we have a lucky winner yet, Carissa?
We do have a winner. We have a winner, Shani. That is you. And not only did she get the hashtag right, but she seems to have gotten the very special way that you type the hashtag right as well.
You're kidding. Wow.
Well done, Shani.
So, Shani, if you could DM us with your email address so that I can go over on Amazon and get your book to you tonight so that you can start reading. So to let everyone know, the primary hashtag is the manager level up. And we spell up uppercase. So Shani got even that right, did she?
Well deserved, Shani. Well deserved. And she responded back with a nice big cheesy emoji grin. I love it. So everyone, I mean, all I can say is thank you so much. Thank you for staying with us. You know, we ran over just a little bit over what we planned. So we really do appreciate you staying with us. And you've been such a wonderful and great audience. I just want to remind everybody you can follow Joan on Joan H Underwood or Underwood Talent Development Services on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And if you are watching this video after tonight's live session, please go ahead, leave any comments or questions, and we promise we're going to try to reply to them all. Now, Joan and Carissa, thank you for another memorable live event and for sharing all your personal stories and insights that birthed this wonderful book, Manager's First Aid Kit. It's really been a pleasure. And I hope everyone who joined us tonight had as great a time as I did. So before we leave, again, I can't help myself. Order your book via Amazon or visit joanhunderwood.com. It's a must read. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Have a wonderful night, everyone. And wherever you are in your corner of the world, please stay safe. Goodbye.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.